is Act of Worship, your source for commentary and discussion on worship, theology, and culture. I'm your host, Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones. Well, hello and welcome to the Act of Worship podcast. This is Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones, continuing the Psalm project, and today covering Psalm 14. I am very excited about this psalm, very unique psalm, but one that might be slightly familiar to many people. Only 7 verses in Psalm 14, so like 13, it is a short one. And this psalm has an attitude of quiet meditation while focusing on human evil. And so similar to 13, which was lament, I have set this psalm to in a minor key as well. And so this is one that I think will remind us of the evil that certainly exists in the world. And it has an attitude, like I said, of quiet meditation, focuses on evil. The beginning of the psalm is similar to Psalm 53. David speaks of the fool, the corrupt. So it is very similar to Psalm. I said Psalm 53. I meant, Psalm 53. That's it. Psalm 53. It is similar to Psalm 53. So many of these psalms, obviously the ones of David, come from similar places in his life. He probably wrote multiple psalms during maybe one moment of his life, and so there will be similar themes. And so this is one of those, Psalm 14. And so we are going to look at this and then break it down. Let me go ahead and read these 7 verses of Psalm 14, and then we will break it down. So this is a Psalm of David, beginning in verse 1. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God." They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God. They have all turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is none who does good, not even one. Have they no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord? There they are in great terror, for God is with the generation of the righteous. You would shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion, when the Lord restores the fortunes of his people. Let Jacob rejoice, let Israel be glad. So let's look at this. David doesn't hold back right at the beginning, speaks of the corrupt. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. Note the use of this psalm by the Apostle Paul in Romans 3, 10 through 18. Let me read that for you. This is Paul speaking. He says, "As it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands. No one seeks God." He goes on and quotes this psalm. He changes it a little bit. In Romans 10:13, he says, "Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. And their paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes." And so Paul understood this psalm. Paul, a Hebrew, obviously would have understood many things relevant to the Israelites. He understands the evil of humanity, and as David does here, and he's referencing this in chapter 14, Psalm 14, and he starts off talking about the fool. And so it has an attitude of quiet meditation, but it focuses on the evil of humanity. It says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. The fool may be highly intelligent by the world's standards, and many of us have met people like that, but oblivious to the true nature of reality. And this is referenced for us in Ecclesiastes 2:14. To be called a fool really is a moral judgment. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. I think why David distinguishes here the difference between the heart and the mind is because even a fool, if he reasoned it out in his mind, would determine that there is a God. Only a fool would say that there is no God. So the fool denies the existence of God as a matter of human concern. This is practical atheism. God is held to be unconcerned about the affairs of the world, and especially the affairs of the individual. Romans 1:19, the Apostle Paul says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them." So if someone denies the existence of God, they are denying what is right in front of them. That is their own choice to do that. And then he goes on and speaks of the corruption of humanity. And then in verse 2, the Lord looks down from heaven to find one who seeks after God. Or literally, he says to see if there are any who understand or who act wisely. One who seeks after God. Fallen man does not actively seek after God. Okay, hear me out on that. If you are a believer and you started at one point in your life seeking God, you did it passively, not actively. God saved you while you were in a passive state, not an active state. And that goes against what many people believe. But if we have to be saved actively, then salvation is dependent on a work. And it is not. We are in a passive state when we are saved by God. When the Holy Spirit enacts salvation upon our lives, it is passively on our part. Not on the Holy Spirit's part, but on our part. We are passive in that moment. We are not active. Humankind does not actively seek after God. In verse 4, it says, "They have no knowledge, all the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread." The wicked exploit people frequently and without feeling guilt. It's a psychotic act, psychotic mannerisms, but that is human nature. We act sometimes like sin is not the norm for humanity, but it absolutely is. And left to our own devices, we would be radically evil. In fact, all of our works, all of our acts that we perform on a daily basis would be nothing but evil if it were not for the Holy Spirit. So evil here, what the psalmist is saying, is as natural as eating bread. I mean, we don't think about when we eat. We just eat. We put it in our mouths. We chew. We swallow. That's what we do. It's natural. Sin is as natural as that. You would put to shame the plans of the poor, but the Lord is his refuge. Verse 6. God can overrule the wicked plans of evildoers for the good of the afflicted. The principle is stated by Joseph in Genesis 50:20, and it's applied to the crucifixion. Listen to this, Acts 2:22 through 24. "Men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst. As you yourselves know, this Jesus delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it." Joseph says that what man meant for evil, God meant for good. And so God, in his sovereignty, can overrule those plans of evil people. In verse 7, "Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion." This is again the place where God most personally and directly revealed his presence. And you see Zion referenced several times in the book of Psalms. And so this is a meditational psalm, but it is one that focuses and reminds us of the evil of humanity, the depravity of humanity. We are all evil by nature. Many people don't like to admit that. They think, well, maybe humanity's mostly good, but we're not. Not at all. And so this is a psalm that reminds us of that, and I've set this to music. Again, similar to Psalm 13 in a minor key. And so hopefully this is something that will help you meditate and worship the Lord as you hear it and use it and fill your mind with it. So thank you for listening today to the Active Worship Podcast. This is Dr. Jonathan Michael Jones.
Within his heart the fool speaks. He says there is no God. In malice they do vile things. Not one of them does good. The Lord looks down from heaven to see the sons of men. If one for God is seeking, if any understands, they all have strayed and wandered, corrupt they have become. Not one shows any goodness, no, not a single one. Within such evildoers, is there no knowledge stored? Like bread they eat my people, not calling on the Lord. There they will be